We're looking at HR data this week, so employees that are with the company, employees that have left the company, and we want to do some analysis on specific months to see how many employees are in the company within that month, and so on and so forth. So to do that, we're going to need to use a technique called date scaffolding. So let's take a look at this challenge because there's a little bit of cleaning up we need to do before we get there. So we can see that in our current employees input, we've got employee ID, join date and salary, whereas in our leavers input, then we have an extra field for leave date. You might also notice that we've got our salary field here is a number, numeric data type, whereas here it's a string data type, so we'll have to do some cleanup there as well. Now to bring these two inputs together, we've kind of always got two options in Tableau Prep. We can either do a union or a join. And in this case, because our field names are so similar, then we're going to do a union. And that means that we're basically stacking those two tables on top of each other. We're adding more rows rather than adding more columns. So although in our first input we didn't have leave date, we now have a null there. Because these are our current employees, they don't have a leave date, but we'll do some cleaning up to add in a leave date for those employees as suggested by the challenge. We'll choose the 3rd of March this year for that leave date. So let's get to some cleaning. So to clean up that salary field, one thing that we could notice here that Tableau Prep's actually told us that during the union it's had to change the salaries that were numeric data type into strings just so that it can combine those two fields. So that's nice that it's kind of given us a little warning there that that's something we might want to check out. So if we look at how we're then going to fix that, we're just going to do a calculated field and keep it as the name of salary so that it just updates our current field. And we're going to, first of all, we're reading this long calculation from the inside out because that's easier to understand what's going on, and that's kind of the way that I write it as well. So first of all, we're doing for the salary field, we're replacing the commas with nothing, so that gets rid of the commas. The reason that I'm doing that is because sometimes Tableau Prep can get a bit confused when there are commas that it's trying to translate into a number. In some countries they use commas to mean decimal points. Sorry about that. Obviously in other countries they use full stops, so it's just easier to get rid of them entirely. And then once we have all the commas replaced with nothing, then we then want to get rid of the pound signs because Tableau Prep doesn't know what to do with them either if it's trying to convert a string into a number. And finally, the last function that we're wrapping this in is an int, so we just want the string to go into a number, basically, or an integer, which int is short for. So now that's all nice and clean, that field there. And the other thing that we're doing is just making sure that all of our current employees have a leave date, just so that when we're doing the date scaffolding later, it knows when to stop making rows. So we're just saying, you know, if there's no leaving date or if it's null, then use the 1st of March, sorry, as the leaving date, otherwise just leave it as it is. So great, we're all ready to do our date scaffolding. So let's look at the other input that we have. So we can see that we've got a month and a year for each of the years that this company has been in operation. Not that long. And we're just going to convert those all to a date data type. So then we also need to make sure that for an employee who joined in the middle of the month potentially, their joining month starts on the 1st of that month, so that they will show up in the report for that month, if that makes sense, when we're joining together these two files. So that's all that we're doing here, is that we're just using a date trunc function for the joining month and a similar thing for the leaving month. So we've just got these two extra fields here. And we can see, for example, if we look down at this first row, then our joining date was the 13th of February. We're just making sure that that is then starting on the 1st of February. Even though the employee didn't start on that day, it just means that they were there for that month and they'll be included in the analysis for that month. So then to do our date scaffolding, then this is a little bit confusing, but once you get your head around it, it makes a lot of sense. So our first condition that we're doing here is saying for our joining month, I want anything in here, any of the months that are after that. And also but then I want you to stop when you get to the leaving month, basically. So add a row for each of those months, but then stop. So that's how we're getting our months that are in between the joining month and the leaving month. Now this one here isn't a greater than or equal to, because in the requirements for this challenge, it's saying at this point that if the employee leaves in that month, then we don't want them to appear in the reporting for that month. So that's why we're just using a greater than sign here and a less than or equal to sign here, because we obviously want them to be in the analysis for the first month that they join, so that's why the equals bit is there. So that's how we're scaffolding out our data. So we'll see that we've gone from 17 rows here to 111 rows here. So let's just have a quick look at a specific employee, because hopefully that will help you to conceptualize it a bit better. Let's go for one that doesn't have many months. So we can see that employee number 4, they joined in February and they left in April. So therefore, the month column here, we have February and March, but we don't have April because they left in April and we want to exclude them from our analysis of April. So we've got a month for every month that a row for every month that they were there, other than that last month. So I hope that makes sense as to why we've done that, because now we can use a nice aggregate function to say group on the month and count distinct employee ID so that we know how many employees there were in the company that month. We can do the average salary for that month, and we can do the total salary for that month. In order to do 2 different aggregations on salary, I did have to duplicate the field back in this step. So just did that by clicking on salary and clicking on duplicate field. And that's how I was able to do both the average and the sum of salary. And then we have our required output here. So thanks for listening, and hopefully that's made it clear.